The United Nations. What's the United States Nations stance on this, and why don't I see that in my media?
Well, the here's an example. The United Nations had a vote on a resolution. Was it about a month and a half ago? That the resolution was that we, the United Nations, condemn the glorification of Nazism, and the reemergence of Nazism, and the glorification of Nazism.
Mm-hmm.
The United States organized all of Europe to abstain from voting for that. They did not want the European Union to condemn the glorification of Nazism, but the United States and Ukraine voted against it.
Wow, time out. Wow, that's heavy. That one's heavy right there.
The rest of the world voted for it.
So
all of Africa, all of Latin America, the Asian Pacific nations all voted to condemn Nazism, and the United States voted against them.
The United States voted against condemning Nazism? I mean, I believe it.
It's correct.
Definitely.
Yep.
And under the premise, like, there's no letter, there's no, okay, we're going to take it a step further, we need to condemn.
No, this resolution wasn't just put on the table and people voted. This went through an elaborate resolution writing and discussion process. And the United States position was, oh, this is just a Russian trick. So they're trying to embarrass the Baltic countries and Ukraine because the Baltic countries and Ukraine have Nazis.
Wow.
So it's a Russian trick. Oh, we don't have any principles that we can stand on our own two legs on. That's why they did it. That's what they said.
So the United Nations stance and posture, which, like I say, I don't see this. I see the NATO perspective and posture, but
now, did you read a headline in the Detroit Free Press about it? Or did you see anything on the network news about that?
No,
it's not the United
thing.
Nations' fault that the American media didn't tell the people.
Yeah. I did not see anything.
Right.
You know, and that's why, like, sometimes with these world stories, it's like I have to dig deep. I got to go to, the Young Turk. I mean, I go all sides, even people I don't agree with. So it's like Young Turk. So this is the Khary Frazier angle. I definitely look for anything that anything Shay sends, and sometimes you're definitely in that mix. So Shay of Riverwise, definitely. So I'm looking Shay, Rich Feldman, also connected to the Riverwise family, the Bog Center. Right. And then it's like, okay, what can I get from the Young Turks? What can I get from what can I get from Al Jazeera? What can I get from BBC? I'm looking at, and then also I like looking at the American news, even the backwards American news. I'm even looking at, what's his name? The crazy yelling guy, Alex Jones. Like, I'm trying to, it's like, if I look at all 15 of these sources, consolidated, and then apply critical thinking, and then understand the stances that most of these people even take, now I can walk back and then come back in and say, all right, this is somewhat of a perspective, right. Versus, ABC World News tonight, America is posturing to support Ukraine as a war seems imminent to happen. Also, we're talking about what's going to happen with, when you need your 5th shot of for your vaccine. Also, it was a dog that won the whatever race, and Queen Elizabeth, will she heal up from a COVID? And then, we're talking about the Oscar nominees. Have you watched all the movies? Dun, 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 and then, you get 2 seconds of, someone, back to you say, the authoritarian stance. It'll be like a reporter, and it'll be, and I think this is intentional too. Usually Eastern European, it's drab, gray, some of the most, it looks like that unbuilt county jail in the middle of Detroit. And they're like about maybe 200 yards in front of there, and it's like, I'm sitting down here in the Ukraine, and it's and we're thinking, and the people are afraid, and then it'll be one person, and then they're speaking another language, and I'm looking at the language. Yes, I'm very fearful for my family, and da 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 da. You see what's going on, and then it's like the next story, snowstorm about to hit the whole East Coast, like
right.
So in my mind, really, if the only news I'm getting is from that bit of world news tonight on ABC, I may only get like 2.5 minutes under in so much of that subtext, that drab background. I've never seen what Russia looks like until, Detroit. It's a lot of Russians here. I know one of my friends, is really close to one, like, like engaged one, and he went to Moscow for a whole month, and I was like, what was it like? And once again, I feel like, man, I've been filled with the propaganda machine. He was like, oh, man, they drink a lot of cognac over there. We were partying most days. Sergei Fedorov coaches a hockey team over there. We were, it was pretty fluid. I was like, wow, that seems interesting. Completely different than the perspective of how America packages it, of just a bunch of people line in step and dropping down to whatever Putin's administration wants to do.
Yep. This Azov battalion, I realize I'm kind of hopping around, but to go back to the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists is the core organization that brings these Nazi formations together. They had a political arm called Right Sector. For a while, they were called the Social National Party, to reverse National Socialism.
Yeah,
calling themselves Social Nationalist Party, and they've used other construct names in the public. In Ukraine, after the Soviet Union was overthrown, or not, overthrown and replaced, the United States supported bringing the Ukrainian Nazis in. They weren't just using them as cannon fodder. They brought them in to help take over the governance of the Ukraine. And over time, the Ukrainian government that they set up, it issued pensions for the World War II Nazis that helped Germany.
Wow.
They set up statues of Bandera, the wartime Nazi leader.
Yeah.
In cities around
in the same way that the Daughters of the Confederacy had to establish those statues. So people understand, like the Confederate statue issue is bigger than you think. It was something of the Daughters of the Confederate Army that did that, meaning a lot of like under the wing of the organization, saying that, if we build back up the ideal and perspective of these men and who they were, especially post-Reconstruction, then that gives them their moxie, confidence, and attitude to continue on as men. But the subtext of that is you were correct, or that thinking of Robert E. Lee was correct. That thinking was a better way of American life.
They're there to be honored.
And it definitely is to be honored. So this same... Basically, a lot of the playbook, as I'm very well aware that a lot of the Nazi playbook came directly from a lot of what happened here to my people.
Well, the Nazi eugenics laws were taken from American eugenics laws.
Yes.
Right? The American eugenicists got awards in Nazi Germany in the 1930s.
Yes.
Okay. Funds were set up in the United States, specifically the Pioneer Fund, operating out of Massachusetts at the time, was set up to continue eugenics because in the later 30s, the academic advisors to the Rockefeller Foundation said, we need to get away from this eugenics stuff. They started seeing what it meant in real life in Germany. And they said, we got to get out of it. So Rockefeller pulled out of the eugenics stuff. And so Wycliffe Draper, a textile manufacturer, set up the Pioneer Fund to make up for this loss of revenue. And it still exists today. And, I spent a little time I did a book on these emigre Nazis, and they're tied to American Nazis, and they're tied to the military-industrial complex, and their ties to the death squads. Back in 1988. And the second version was published in 91. And one of the guys I focused on was a guy named Roger Pearson. He was a British eugenicist who was active in organizing the Northern League, which was a post-World War II reconstruction of Nazis that gathered in what was called the Teutoburger Forest of southern Germany to go to these cultic pagan rites of the Nordic race and all this kind of stuff. He was a real wacko. And he was brought into the United States, and the Pioneer Fund started giving him money, and he was publishing material on this. And he published 4 books. And in one of them, he said specifically that it's if the superior race does not exterminate the inferior race, they commit racial suicide. So it was mandated that the superior race exterminate, and it was his job to lay out who and why the inferior races, who they were and why they needed to be exterminated. And, of course, Jews were among that, but everybody else. And so he was strictly Nordicist. And this guy was put as head of a CIA worldwide operation called the World Anti-Communist League, which was tied to the whole national security apparatus of the United States. That was the group I went to meetings on. And Reagan wrote a fundraising letter for him and so forth. And this guy is just a straight up, explicit, open exterminationist. It just blew me away how prevalent it was, you know.
And I want to give this point to a lot of people too, as far as going to different sources. And I think right now, and it's funny, I've been having more discussions of certain people understanding the backwardsness of thought in many, because we can be backwards in thought and we progress. But also understanding the context of a key tool in propaganda is giving some truth, but it's deceit. So it's like, I'm going to give you a breadcrumb of truth, a breadcrumb of truth, a breadcrumb of truth, and now I'm going to drop in the pivot. And I've won, I guess, I've won your trust over by giving you some of this truth, showing you and exposing you this truth, where now you're pulling back on what would be applying your critical thinking skills, because that's really what the root of even my commitment to working with Riverwise or Detroit is different. Like, don't just trust me. Don't just trust Russ. I mean, go out, look up this information. Like, it is reliant upon us, especially in this day and age, with have so much information, so much access to information, and obviously access to misinformation. But people act as if misinformation didn't exist then. Sometimes misinformation in a book can be more dangerous than misinformation on YouTube. Because it's back to the authoritarian posture. I like that term. I'm going to be using that often now. That a book may have, because it'll have scholars. It'll have notes at the bottom. It'll have, the university published this. I mean, would Penguin Publishing publish something that would be a lie? Like, these are the thought processes into people. So I just urge people to use critical thinking skills, and with that, as we get closer to a close, what should the average like what stance should Americans even have in this play to say, to have an anti-war stance? People such as myself and you, most people would look at it and say, yeah, you're definitely going to be anti-war. How should people approach this to even know? As I've never in my life, and I'm you know what I'm saying? I've never in my life been more anticipating a State of the Union address. Not because of this situation as much, but this definitely plays a role. But I feel as though we have a sitting president that's very silent on many issues.
That's correct.
He has not given a context to many of, I guess most politicians' campaign promises are always, I don't even want to say be broken, but that's just the nature of politics. Apparent, we're going to do this, and this. You may get, half the stuff your parent, but because the context of stuff in politics is a group, it's an associative game, even though when they're campaigning, it's like, stars, moon, pizza, ice cream every day. But I'm very interested in this State of the Union address, and even more interested on how these politicians that posture themselves as against everything the other side says are now in unison on this issue. And it's because that's where my critical thinking skills are triggered, because it's like